What we are going to be doing today is we're going to have a session where you get to ask an appraiser, Mr. Tim McNamara, who is my favorite appraiser in the area. You get to ask him any burning question you have about home value. And and there's two things that really got me thinking about this. And I want to address those. But before I do, for anyone on the call who does not know me, my name is Christina Jasper with Jasper Mortgage Group. My team and I are very passionate about educating realtors on all things that y'all want to learn about. So if you have to jump off early, I have a huge favor to ask for everybody on this call. If you can drop in the chat one topic that you want to learn about, I can bring in a presenter like Tim, who, do you want to learn about, I don't know, social media or absolutely anything financial? You want to talk to an estate attorney, a real estate attorney, I don't care who. If you could just drop in the chat, maybe one topic that you'd really love for us to cover on our next one. I'm trying to do this quarterly for realtors. So we'll have another one late this year, beginning of next year. And I want you guys to drive the topic because I had a realtor, Heidi, who actually I asked her this question and she said, I would love to ask an appraiser some questions. This is how and why we have Tim here. The other reason we have Tim here is because we're seeing such crazy things in markets right now. We track all of our market stats. If you have sent me a client in the past couple months, you know you get this at least once a month by email, along with all the clients you sent us and their status. But this is at the bottom of the email. These are all the statistics that we track off of contracts that come across our team's desk here in the triangle, along with interest rates. What I find is fascinating is that the past few clients I've worked with this week have lost multiple offer situations, which is so interesting to me because the statistics tell me that 52% have gone under list price, which would make me think that there's not a lot of multiple offer situations going on, but it turns out there
I'm
are
doing
some
a
multiple offer
Zoom thing.
situations. Oh, I'm sorry. There's someone on an
You're leaving?
iPhone. I'm not sure who it is that needs to mute themselves, if that's okay. iPhone user, if you can mute yourself. I don't know who's there. That might be Marie. I'm not sure. But we still are seeing things go over list price. About 11% of our contracts are still going over list price. And also about 11% of contracts have some sort of seller credit towards interest rate on them. So we are still seeing that. 17% of buyers are paying some sort of realtor commission to their buyer's agent, not the whole 3%. We're seeing a lot of 0.25, half a percent commission to buyer's agents. And I love the fact that due diligence is still below 1%. We're not seeing a lot of due diligence come in over 1% of purchase price, which makes my lender heart happy because if I make one single mistake on a loan and somebody doesn't close, they lose that due diligence and it just terrifies me and keeps me up at night when the diligence is a little bit too high. I can't write that check, right? When it's $25,000, $30,000. So that's what I'm seeing. But I had just asked Tim before y'all joined, when markets are weird like this, when you're seeing multiple offer situations and seeing houses sit, it must be really hard to do appraisals. How do you pin a value on a house that is moving quickly versus one that isn't? And does that weigh in on things? So you're tired of hearing me chat. So I'm going to turn this back over to Tim. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see his lovely face while he's talking. Tim, I had sent you a few questions that came up that from text and email. Do you want to address those first, and then we can open up the floor to everybody who's on the call to see what questions they have?
Yeah, sure. I can kind of run through these questions and some other notes that I jotted down that I thought would be very important. And I love this process because for a long time, I always want to try to be as active as I can with real estate agents. It does a number of different things. One is it really kind of gets agents familiar with who I am. So when I'm asking them some questions, because I think an appraiser does the best job when they communicate with real estate agents, because as an agent, you're the one who is working with buyers and sellers. And you see firsthand what the buyers and the sellers' actions are and what their motives are, what their behaviors are, where they might go look for a property. It's interesting. Sometimes I'll ask an agent, a buyer's agent, hey, where did your buyer look for a home? And they settled on this one, but where else did they look? And that may be a great place for someone to start with regards to, hey, I don't have a comp inside the neighborhood, but this buyer did look in this particular neighborhood, in this other neighborhood. And it's important when you go outside that you're trying to use comparable sales that the typical buyer of the subject property would have considered if available at the same time. So if the question ever comes up, hey, what's a comparable sale? Why is the appraiser using this comp in the report? One might be is just to placate the lender, satisfy underwriting or Fannie Mae's secondary market requirements of finding a comp that is within 1 mile or closed in 90 days. The second and the more important reason is because it's most like the subject. And if the subject was available for sale, and so the comp was also available for sale, a typical buyer would have looked at both of them and decided between the two of them. A comparable sale to a property, a subject property, is not too comparable if the same buyer or any buyer that was considering the subject property, if they wouldn't have even considered that home, then it's not that comparable, is it? So with regards to the questions that we have, and one of the questions had a lot to do with some adjustments. So when you're doing a CMA, whether it be for your seller or your buyer, what I try to do is keep it as simple as possible. So I'm not saying don't make adjustments, but just remember when you're making adjustments, is it significant enough to move the needle? And is it supportable in the marketplace through market extraction or match pairs? So giving you an example, it's a little bit of exaggerated example, but if you have like a dilapidated fence and you don't want to make adjustments for fences and some things that you can't necessarily support or adjustments that the appraiser is not going to be able to make. I'm not a big fan. I'll tell you firsthand, I do not make adjustments for fireplace differences. So if you had 2 fireplaces, 3 fireplaces, 1 fireplaces, I just don't make those adjustments. I see them on some appraisals and you'll see a plus $1,500 adjustment. On a $500,000 and a $750,000 home, $1,500 is not enough to extract in the marketplace, and it's certainly not going to change the outcome of your value. Adjustments should be consider this. What are the main market drivers of your property? So when you look at your subject property, if you're in North Hills, it might be land value, right? So if a property is going to sell for $1.2 million, a major market driver could be the actual earth. How much is that lot worth? And then it could be, of course, the living area. How large is the square footage? And a third one might be the condition of the property. So 3 examples of market drivers. You've got your land value, your gross living area, and your condition. Some of the adjustments had to do with condition. So when you're making condition adjustments, I'll get this. When we did go through a couple of refinance booms, I know some owners were saying, hey, I just threw in this brand new kitchen. I spent $100,000 on it. And when they got the appraisal, the appraiser didn't make $100,000 adjustment for that new kitchen. When you're discussing these improvements with the homeowner on the listing side, just remind them that as nice as this kitchen is, and it's certainly going to increase the marketability and the value of the property, it's not going to be dollar for dollar in the report or in the marketplace. And the reason why I like using kitchen is because when you have a comparable sale that you pulled up, great comp, looks great, except it doesn't have a brand new kitchen, but it does have a kitchen. So think of it this way. That comp that has a kitchen that was part of its sales price, and it has a value in use. And it has a contribution to the sales price. Just using rough numbers, let's just pretend you're in a $500,000 price point. The house is 15 years old, and your seller has a brand new kitchen, which is fantastic. and it costs $75,000. The comp down the street that has that same, it has the original 15-year-old kitchen that might have had a couple new appliances, still had a kitchen that contributed to the sales price. Maybe it's only a 50% adjustment, meaning maybe you're only adjusting 35,000 for the kitchen. Because keep in mind, you don't adjust this whole 75,000 because that kitchen in the comp has a value and use, a contribution. So just when you're making your adjustments for condition, just remember there's a remaining life or an economic life for the comps variables: heating, cooling systems, roof shingles, kitchen, bathrooms, things like that. Only if you were using a comp that didn't have a kitchen would you really adjust the full amount. Only if that comp you're using was a complete dog, like that kitchen is beyond usefulness. Typically, you're not going to use that comp because if the kitchen is at the end of its economic life, the ability to produce a value in the marketplace, it's probably the whole house is that way, and you're probably not using it as a comp. You're going to want to try to use other comps that have been updated or remodeled, over the years, if not recent, at least, just to find something that reflects that subject property's condition. So when you're making adjustments for, it's less is best when it comes to adjustments. And absolutely, if there is a significant difference in condition, make those adjustments. But just remember that house, looking at the photographs, what those conditions look like. Because remember, the appraiser and the buyer and the buyer's agent, they don't, well, sometimes they might have seen the house if they were searching for homes for a while. But the photography photos these days can make a home look really nice. So it's hard to make adjustments. Appraisers have a hard time making adjustments for condition if they had never seen the house other than looking at the interior photos. And those photos are going to make that carpeting look pretty good, the walls looking good. So just be careful with those condition adjustments, and just remember, just applying some common sense on how much those adjustments are. And it's always going to be price point related. I think one of the questions had to do with how much in certain price points. A garage is going to have more value in $1 million home than it is in a $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 home. And that's going to be the case with any adjustments across the board. Just keep in mind the overall price point.
Does it make sense that that's percentage based? So let's say you had a $500,000 home sitting next to $1 million home. You put a value on the screen porch for the $500,000 home. Is the value for that screen porch because other homes double the value? Is it about double the value for the screen porch adjuster?
Yeah, sure. Without a doubt, the adjustment's much higher. Keep in mind these things when you make adjustments on site improvements, right? So you're going to have the condition of the improvement. I think a question in here had to do with a brand new screen porch. And I haven't priced porches lately, but I know they are very expensive. So if you have a $35,000, $40,000 screen porch, consider the condition, the conformity to the rest of the home. For instance, a $50,000 or $45,000 to $50,000 screen porch on $1 million home is going to have a different contribution than if you put that same screen porch on a $200,000 home. And you might go, why is that? Well, because the buyer's not going to appreciate for that given improvement that's there. The house, a 2,000 square foot house doesn't, I don't want to say deserve a $50,000 porch. It's the market's going to pay less than that than they would have paid for it if it was attached to a $800,000 to $1 million home. The condition, the quality, and the size of the porch are very important. I've seen some screen porches. I'm like, why even build it? You can't even put a table out there. Without a doubt, backyard, screen porches, outdoor spaces, patios, pools have significantly more contribution in today's market than they did in the past. I remember back in the day, we weren't making any adjustments for pools really. And if anything, you might have saw a $5,000 or $10,000 adjustment. Now it's more like 100 to 150, depending on the price point and the condition. People like the plug and play. We have a lot more people moving in from out of the area. They don't have both the patience, the time, or they rather just roll those improvements all into a mortgage than to have to wait to build it themselves. I think someone was saying someone's less patient. I think society is less patient when it comes to a house. And I think I would pay close to replacement cost for a cat daddy pool if it meant I could just have it as soon as I moved in. Who wants to move into a house and deal with, contractors and a 12-month timeline on building a gun night pool in a backyard? So, and plug and play is a great thing for buyers. And so you're seeing more people pay up for those type of houses. The best way to represent the market contribution or what the appeal is that your subject should receive is to find another comparable sale with a similar feature. I know it's ridiculous to say, but if you have a cat daddy pool in the backyard, try to find a comp with a similar amenity. That way you can kind of show the seller or your buyer, hey, this house sold for more because of these improvements. And to further demonstrate to your buyer or seller that contribution or that sales price difference, let's say you have a subject property that's listed and you're representing a buyer, and the buyer comes along and goes, yeah, I love this pool, I love this house, but I don't see how this house is worth $150,000 more. If you find another comparable sale for your buyer, take a look at how that house closed with the pool compared to its peers in its respective neighborhood. So what you do is, I call it a separate match pair. So you found a house that closed with a pool. How did that house with a pool sell compared to the other homes around the same time in its respective neighborhood? I sometimes call it a time machine. So go back in time to when that house closed with a pool and pull up comps 6 months, 8 months before, and maybe 3 or 4 months afterwards, and see how the other houses sold with the same square footage without a pool. And you'll see quickly that you can extract out an idea of, wow, the house did sell for about $100,000 more compared to the other homes in a specific neighborhood. And that's a great way to kind of demonstrate to your buyer that it is priced correctly because of the pool, or to a seller or to an appraiser that, hey, this pool has more contribution than you're willing to give it in the appraisal.
And Tim, there was a question that came into the chat about that. So Mary asked, if you find a Fat Daddy comp more than 2 miles away, that is the closest comp, does that hurt anything value-wise?
No. So when you represent buyers, it's not like you tether them to your office and allow them only to search homes within a mile or 2 miles. You're going to look at houses that are in a geographical market area that this buyer wants to be in. Consider the market drivers of this property location. I did an appraisal in Western Wake County, higher end home, much higher end home. But I searched comparable sales all along the 540 corridor, from the RTP all the way down to US 1. And the reason why is because I think a typical buyer would consider homes with easy access to 540 or to 40, so they could either get to Chapel Hill Medical Center research. Maybe there's a doctor. They're getting to Research Triangle Park because they're a CEO, because they work at one of the large companies there. You want to find comparable sales that are neighborhoods that typical buyer would look at because of the access to those market drivers. Market drivers are external influences that provide an influence to the buyer to purchase in that location. Access to the RTP, RDU, and major corporations. So that location of that comp may be 2, 3, 4 miles away. And the more the home is like the subject, the better. So did I just talk about market drivers of the subject property, land, quality, size, and condition? Try to find comps that would check the box for as many market drivers that you have in your subject property. In
Would
this example,
Oh, sorry, Tim, I have a really
no,
quick question. Would school systems be one of those market drivers or no?
school systems used to be something we looked at in the past, but because of the uncertainty of what schools and all that, and also buyers might use go to private schools. So you have the Cary Academy. In my example, Cary Academy is on that side of town, so they might go to Cary Academy. In North Raleigh, it might be Ravenscroft. Inside the Beltline, obviously, we have all those. Schools are important, but it's not something that I isolate or pull out and give as a reason to use a comp. I won't say I use this comp because it goes to the same school district, because there could be some caps, and not every buyer has a child going into high school. It could be that they're empty nesters. It could be they don't have kids. But the one thing that is absolute is the proximity to a workplace environment. And I know people can work from home too. Um, but what was I saying about the subject property? Um, when you're looking for comparable sales, let's just say your subject property is on a half acre, 7,000 square feet, 2 years old. Those are three market drivers for our particular property. I used a comp that was on an acre and a half. So it didn't check the box for site size, but it did check the site, the box for square footage, quality, condition, age built. It's hard to find comps that check all the boxes unless you're in a tract built neighborhood, and you have the same builder, same floor plan, same age. And even then, you really don't have everything covered, do you? Right? It sold 3 months ago, right? It was listed for one price and sold for a lot less. They paid concessions. So what you do as buyers and agents and listing agents is extremely difficult. And what I tell agents is you cannot perfect an imperfect market, because the market itself is imperfect. We aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. And homeowners aren't perfect. They make rash decisions on certain things. And they're either undermotivated, they don't want to listen. I find many of them, their expectations are based on a financial spreadsheet. They need to sell it for this so they can buy the next house. It could, the list. You've talked to people all the time. Um, the best thing to do with any type of CMA is to make sure that you bracket with your comparable sales. Try to find a home that closed that's above your property, superior to, and inferior to. I use the analogy of selling a car. If you had a Honda car with 50,000 miles on it and it was 3 years old, would you use an electric car? Or if my car was gas, would you use an electric Jeep, or would you use a truck as a comp? No, because it's a completely different buyer. So try to find comparable sales that bracket your square footage. That's important. And best reflects the square footage, best reflects the typical buyer for your house. Consider recent sales, yes, but I would prefer to go further back in time if the home was more like the subject. I see a lot of agents and banks and other appraisers fall in this trap that a home that just closed down the street just sold last week. But if it's nothing like our subject, it's not comparable. But what you can use that home for is to understand market absorption. So the house is not, so when doing a market analysis, even look at the non-comparable sales to give you a temperature check on the market. You've probably had this happen before. You go, how the hell did that thing sell? My gosh, it's the ugliest house on the street. But if it sold above list price and in one day, you're going to probably walk away going, the market's pretty hot. And so one of the things you're going to look at is the active listings and look at the pending sales. Pending sales are really important market indicators because they probably will be closed by the time you sell your house and your house is going to be appraised. So always consider actives and pending sales in your CMA.
So, Tim, I have a quick question about you had mentioned I'd rather go back in time farther for a comparable home. When market values are fluctuating as much as they are, it's so interesting to me when we get appraisals in because I'll have some appraisers using time variances, for uh, value for time. How do you feel about that? Like if you were to find a comp from 6 months ago that's a better comp than something 2 months ago, but 6 months is a lot different than it is today, would you do a time difference, a time variance for that?
I I don't make time adjustments
Okay,
in this market today,
that's good to
um,
know.
for the most part. Okay, I ask myself, this is a great question when it comes to when you get your market data, what do you do with that data? Like, you could have the same house, identical floor plan sell 6 months ago. Try to do this. Try to make that 6 to 8 month old sale relevant to today's market. Okay. How do you do that? Look at the active listings and see how they look compared to that closed sale. An example would be you have a 3,000 square foot house, 4 bedroom, 3 bath, 2 car garage, standard property. 6 months ago, you had the near identical property to your subject property sell for $450,000. If in the current market you have an active listing or a pending that's listed for less than that prior closed sale, then you're going to probably need to keep that in mind in your list price, because the most recent activity is going to be looked at first to address what the current value is of your subject property. And you might say, well, why is that? Well, because any buyers that come to look at your subject property will also be looking at the pending sale and those actives as a possible equal or a substitute property to purchase.
Mm.
That's the key. So in your question, if that property 6 months ago or 8 months ago or 12 months ago sold for 450 and I have comps that sold for 425, then yes, a time adjustment is appropriate. Or I just explained that I didn't put a lot of weight on that sale because the more recent comps are better indicators of the current market.
And Tim, I want to be conscious of the fact that I had promised about a 30-minute meeting today, and we're getting kind of up to it. I want to play a quick game with you and tell me whether or not we can do this, because maybe this is just like it's just going to be too hard to do. I want to throw out a something in a construction, let's just say full bath, half bath, and a value.
Sure, sure.
Can we play the high-low game? Do you think it's high or low for an average home
Whatever you'd
for
like to do, just keep in mind these adjustments will vary dependent on the price point and the conformity of the property. And I don't mean to
No, no, no.
make
Yeah,
this longer.
we need no. Yeah, we need the fine print because if it's $1 million home, it would be different. But let's
Well,
just say like on an average price house.
if you and I think your team of agents would understand this too, but if you had a $500,000 home that only had 1.5 bathrooms, that's an issue.
That's an issue. Yeah,
And that adjustment is going to be a significantly higher than you would if you were going from 3.5 to 4.5 or 5.5 bathrooms in the same neighborhood. So ask yourself what's common or typical. But
got it.
yeah, go ahead, shoot.
So let's say half bath, $1,500.
Probably a little on the low side. But again, yeah, probably $2,500 to $4,500 is probably a good adjustment to make.
Full bath, 3,000 to 5,000.
You're probably looking between 5 and 10 at least.
Okay.
And again, it depends on what you see in the neighborhood to be common, because
Okay.
buyers, when you're in a price point where you have 3 or 4 kids, 2 daughters, one son, that additional bathroom is going to be key for separating sexes and just being able to have more privacy within the house. It could make a significant difference in the price point. But yeah,
So you would
10,000.
add value if it had two bathrooms near the second, third bedrooms to help with issues like that.
Well, the bathrooms are, the bathroom count, where the bathrooms are located is important. I mean, if the full bathroom is downstairs on one side of the house and there's no bedroom down there, you're not going to make that adjustment probably because it really
Mm,
just has the utility or the usefulness as a half bathroom. Rarely is anyone going to take a shower there because it's nowhere near the bedrooms. That rarely comes up, but consider the conformity. What's typical for the neighborhood? 10,000 it
it makes
seems
sense.
reasonable for sure.
How about a fence? 2 to 3 thousand for a fence.
I love fences because they keep kids private in the back, safe in the backyard, depending on the height of the fence, how much privacy it provides, the quality of the fence. Sure, you could adjust between 5 and 10. It depends again on how much fence. Is it a wire fence that anyone can hop over, or is it a nice fence with tall 6 foot wood fence that probably cost about 30 grand to build?
This is one I run into a lot with some of my past clients who are doing refinances after finishing a basement, finished below grade or finished attic spaces. $10 per square foot. Nope.
But that's a little low.
Left. Okay.
Low. So finished basement is interesting, and I keep on I'm repeating myself. Is it comes down to how much square footage you have upstairs, so the
Hmm.
conformity. So if you're in a neighborhood with a typical 4,000 square foot homes, and you have 4,000 and 2,000 down below, now you have a 6,000 square foot basement. That additional 2,000 square feet may not carry the same price per square foot contribution in the marketplace as if you had a 2,500 square foot or 3,000 square foot house above grade and an additional 1,500 down below, because now your house is similar to or conforms a lot better in overall square footage to your peers or other homes in the neighborhood. I've seen some houses that are so large upstairs, and then in the basement, they just have a repeat of, bedroom number 7, bonus room number 3. It's a little bit overkill square footage, and so your adjustment is going to be a little bit less. The best thing to do when you're working with a buyer or a seller with those type of properties that are significantly larger, maybe for the neighborhood, is look at what the subject property did the last time it sold. It's so interesting when a seller is a buyer and now is a seller. At the time that they bought the home, they probably didn't pay that much more above the marketplace in the neighborhood for that additional square footage. But then all of a sudden, when they sell 3 years later, they think it's got the same price per square foot as the above grade square footage. So you can go back in time and take a look at how the subject property sold to its other homes that closed just before and after that sale, to get a feel what that market contribution or that price difference was back then. And you can apply that price difference to the current value of the comps today. So if our subject property sold for 200 grand more back then maybe add the 200 to today's values, or at least give a percentage, or it's a great place to start on what to adjust. But I think a question came up earlier, price per square foot for adjustments. 1/3 of the total sales price per square foot is not a bad place to start. So if a home
Okay.
sells for $300 a square foot, all right, 100 is the land, 100 is the garages, landscaping, decks, porches, bathrooms, kitchen, and the other 100 maybe has something to do with the contribution of the square footage itself. So you'd adjust $100 a square foot. In the basement,
Okay.
maybe that adjustment's closer to 50 to $100 per square foot. Um, and what the buyer or the seller has to realize is that if you have a 2,000 square foot basement and they look at the contribution, they might say, oh my gosh, that seems so low. That adjustment for square footage is based on an average. So it's 75 times all 2,000 square feet. If you really looked at it, the first 1,000 probably had over $100 a square foot. The next 500 maybe closer to 75. The last couple hundred square feet might have had no contribution. And it's because as the house gets larger and larger, the market contribution or amount of money that their buyer's willing to pay goes down and down because it's just excess square footage.
And does that apply also to like unfinished square feet too? I mean, I know that it's not going to be the same value, but it's is unfinished basements just excess square footage for storage, right? So does it carry the same value? Like what would be an unfinished cost per square foot?
I mean, maybe 25 to 30. It just depends on the size, the
Yeah.
condition, the quality of the ceiling height, things like that. The best thing to do in your CMA is to at least use one or two comps that have a similar market driver, a finished basement, unfinished basement, things like that. So you can really isolate that separately with a sale in your CMA. That's so important. Otherwise, you're going to have straight line adjustments across the board for a difference. Your subject has a finished basement, the comps don't have finished basements, and it's going to be a plus, plus, plus for, and the lenders want to see at least one comparable sale with a like variable because they don't like those plus adjustments across the board. Because they're going to say,
Yeah.
well, how did you come up with it? How do I know it's not less or more? Why isn't it, the adjustment could be higher or lower? Why aren't you supporting that?
Thank you so much, Tim, for playing my game with me.
I'm sorry.
Is there any other thing that I missed that y'all want to know? The cost, like screen porch or chime in? Yeah, Heather.
Just a clarifying question, Tim. When you were talking about things like a screened porch, let's say it's in a neighborhood where some have it, some don't, and somebody has recently added a $50,000 screened porch. Um, is it fair to say that if they just added it and now they're selling, they're going to get something close to $50,000 on the adjustments versus, in 10 years, maybe they're going to get $25,000 on the adjustment?
What price point is the house? Is it $1 million home or?
No, say it's a medium price home and
Yeah, my experience has been is that if they sell the house right away, that it's probably 50 cents on the dollar.
okay.
It's they're not going to get as much for it. When homeowners ask me, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? I try to remind them. I say if you're going to sell it tomorrow, then don't do it. Okay. But if you're going to be in the house for the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to get so much enjoyment and opportunity costs out of that porch. Don't think about what my return is, because after 5 to 10 years from now, who knows what the market's going to be like. And all that time, you're going to be able to enjoy that feature. If they're looking for guidance on how much to spend, I just ask them to think about the neighborhood in general, their overall price point currently, the size of their house, and how, you want the improvement to be consistent and conform to the neighborhood price point.
Right. So you don't want to over improve.
No, but
I know there's no straight answer to all these things. We're just trying to get a general,
there
because
isn't. I try to
adding a
get
roof.
I try to get owners to kind of feel comfortable in their investment and let them know, don't cut any corners and not have what you want.
Gotcha.
Because if you plan on staying in it, you're gonna be really upset with yourself that you didn't put a fireplace out there, or that you didn't do a tongue and groove ceiling, or you didn't put wrought iron and you just put wood. Just do it the way you want it, love it, live it, and get as much out as you can, and worry about when you sell it, when you sell it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tim before we wrap up? Okay, great. Tim, this has been so helpful. I really, really appreciate it. And
You're so
thank you
welcome.
for weighing in on, and if any other questions come in, I'll shoot you an email and let you know.
Please do. And your team of agents are more than happy to contact me anytime. You are a valuable client to us. I want to help out your team as much as possible. So thank you.